Welcome back to Kinwise Conversations podcast, where we explore the real-world crossroads of humanity and technology. Today, we're heading to the shores of Flathead Lake in Polson, Montana, to meet Connor Mulvaney, science teacher, computer science catalyst, and freshly minted leader of AI EDU's expanded Trailblazers Fellowship for rural serving educators. Connor has spent the past 2 years piloting AI literacy lessons with his own students, coaching colleagues who never thought they'd utter the words large language models. This fall, he'll steer brand new Trailblazer cohorts to give teachers the tools, training, and $875 stipend they need to make AI relevant, inclusive, and yes, a little bit fun. If you've ever wondered how to turn AI fear into classroom curiosity, or how a fly fishing fanatic ended up teaching deepfakes by showing students giant, totally fake trout, stick around. Connor's story is equal parts practical strategy and big picture hope. Let's dive in. Connor, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing about your experiences and your story. Before we dive into specifics about AI and what you've been doing in that realm, I want to know about who you are and what readers need to know about you to be oriented to the conversation we're about to have today.
Yeah, so my name's Connor Mulvaney. I live in rural Montana. I live in Polson. For the past 5 years, I've been working at the high school there doing some substitute teaching, teaching earth science, teaching computer science, kind of a lot of different content areas. For the last school year, I took on an AI leadership role within the district where I spearheaded professional development, professional learning all around AI. I had a couple different formal professional learning PD workshops that I would give, as well as some informal luncheons, and would talk a lot with teachers about AI. So I've done a lot of learning for myself around AI over the past couple of years, having a lot of conversations with kids and with teachers as well. This fall, I'll be transitioning into a new role with AI EDU, where I'll be working to organize some professional learning cohorts for teachers in Montana, as well as across the US, putting some cohorts together for teachers to build their own understanding of AI, be equipped with some tools to talk to students in their class about AI. And so I'm sure I'll share a little bit more about some of those opportunities coming up. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, where I'm at, and some of the projects that I'm working on.
That's really cool. I know you've done some like computer science education, and then now your focus has shifted to like, how did that happen? Like, how did you
Mhm.
become a person who was sort of talking with teachers and students of technology?
My first full-time role in high school, in Polson High School, was partly teaching computer science, and I didn't have a computer science background. And the principal said, "Hey, there's an opening here. You have to teach computer science." Well, I got sent to a training, and so I learned how, like many teachers, I was like, "Oh, here's this class you could teach," and then got some training to teach it. And so I was learning alongside the kids computer science and computer coding, and throughout that process, I started exploring ChatGPT just because it was out, it was new, it was something that I had heard about. I think from there, as the AI models continued to progress, I did a lot of going back and forth with ChatGPT to help me refine my code as I was new to coding. I would say for that first year, I was kind of experimenting on my own, and then I started to progress to thinking about how these types of AI models, these large language models, might impact the way that we look at work, the way that kids might look at some of the work that they do in schools. And so just thinking about the impact that these tools might have on the classroom. Once I started playing around with these tools a little bit, you start to think, well, these are really pretty powerful AI models. They also have some limitations as well. And so that's an interesting point to kind of see some really great tools that are really good at, say, writing code, and then also really bad at some other simple things like word counting. So I feel like those are interesting examples to look at both strengths and limitations, which is, I think, part of like this education where we look at AI and talk to kids about AI and build this understanding of what AI is and what its strengths and limitations are. It helps inform when we may choose to use those tools.
Yeah, I love that example where, it's really powerful at writing code and really word count. I think it's such a paradigm shift for folks who have, most people are using computers, and word count
Mhm,
has been around forever and feels so
mhm,
simple. And yet it's something that the generative AI tools have struggled with. And so
mhm,
I think those examples are probably really helpful when you're trying to explain to teachers and students
mhm.
how this technology works. When did you realize that this was like a bigger thing than just you playing around with AI tools and kind of having conversations with students or your coworkers? Like, when did it, I mean, this is now your job. Like, how
Mhm.
did you realize that it was moving in that direction?
I would say it was probably like a little over a year ago. Maybe I started to think about, maybe closer to 2 years ago. I started, a colleague of mine, friend of mine down in Missoula, Jason Neefer, was running some informal Zoom meetings where he would lead some discussions about AI just for Montana teachers. There are some other teachers outside of Montana, but he's been a really great colleague and connection for me to think about AI. And I would say those helped me to start to think deeply about maybe AI's role or not its role in education. I would say having conversations with other people, other educators, other teachers about this, as well as just like when you look at an AI tool and a large language model and many of the different ways that we have looked at student work, like it could be writing, it could be writing code, it could be anything. Like AI is good at doing all of those things. And I guess I'm gonna like put an asterisk at good there because I think one thing it is good at is giving an answer, and that answer isn't always right. And so I know a lot of students are, maybe they don't want to do the assignment, and so they go and have AI help them or do a good chunk of that assignment, and it's always going to give an answer, or at least almost always going to give an answer, rather than saying we should like start to think about these things first. Or and that type of AI use is definitely concerning. And I know there's a lot of teachers out there concerned about like AI use and cheating and doing schoolwork. And I think I'm concerned about that quite a bit as well, because if we don't have specific structure for when students could use AI or when they couldn't, then some kids are just going to use it all the time. Others are not going to use it. There's going to be some inconsistency there. And so looking at how AI is impacting education as a whole, I think a lot of people are lumping AI into this computer science thing, but it does affect a lot of different content areas. I think especially the humanities even more so than computer science maybe.
Yeah, I've thought about that as well because I've been looking for educators who are leading the way in AI, and it's a lot of former computer science teachers, probably
Hmm.
because you all are the ones folks are looking to say, what do we do with this technology? But when you
Hmm.
think about what large language models are actually good at, it is a lot of the writing, the it's very good at creating outputs that are very similar, maybe identical to the outputs that we would ask students for to assess learning. And so that impacts everyone. It doesn't just impact the computer sciences. And so being able to help teachers to see that, but also how, and I'm curious because I know you're working with a lot of educators and leading PD. How do you navigate the sphere of cheating? I've talked to educators who are like, I don't want to go anywhere near it. I don't want to touch
Hmm.
it. I'm concerned students aren't going to learn. At the same time, students are going to do what students do, particularly if they don't have guidance. And so, how have you been helping teachers navigate this?
Yeah, so I guess I would give two answers to that. How do we address these AI tools? And also, like, what's the correct way or what's the right way to teach about or show kids these different tools? And I would say, like, one of my favorite things to do, both with educators and with students, is to just have a couple guiding informal questions about AI. And some of my favorites are like, what's AI good at? What's AI not good at? And what is one thing you want to learn about AI? And so, three super easy questions to have a conversation or that kind of guided conversation. And so, what I have found is that when I have those up on my board at the beginning of class as a bell ringer, it kind of starts a conversation that may start to get at could be student misconceptions. Some students are going to start to be candid about their AI use, and it's not about like, hey, catching this kid because he or she is using the AI to write their English papers. I'm not so concerned about that. I'm more concerned about understanding why a kid or how a student might be using those tools. Another way that I found a lot of great success in talking to students about AI is using some AI EDU resources. They have AI literacy curriculum for free for anyone to download at aiedu.org. Some of my favorites are the AI snapshots, which are these more structured bell ringers with kind of a news item with a reflection question. So we could be talking about something like AI synthetic voice. There's a lot of companies out there that can make fake voices from a short audio recording, and having a reflection question following that up with like, what are the risks and benefits of this technology? Where could it be used? well, where could it be used, maybe not so well. And so those are more structured, kind of news item with reflection question or a couple of questions. And that to me has been a really great way to also talk about the ethics of these tools and as well as maybe their limitations or appropriate use cases. And so for me, those two have been kind of really great steps for me to start to not only break the ice with students about talking about AI, but also start to build some of their knowledge and understanding. And also put like a disclaimer in here that like I'm pretty hesitant to give students chatbot access and like go hop on AI to do this thing or that thing. I think there's a number of reasons that chatbots in the classroom are challenging. There's the data privacy side, there's the bias and ethics of these systems, and there's also just I'm not quite sure that jumping onto a chatbot is like a really great structured assignment. It could be good for exploration at times, but I would rather kind of work all together on something, and maybe there are appropriate exploration times, and that depends on the teacher's discretion and the content area and all of those things. But I just think that having some real intentionality about when students are going to use tools is how I feel.
I agree with that so much. Being intentional about why you're choosing to use a tool,
Mhm,
when you're choosing to
mhm,
use a tool really matters for
mhm,
student learning. And I think there's a lot to unpack in the three examples that you just
mhm,
shared. So I want to loop up to the first one. I think that informal conversation is so important
mhm,
about AI use because if we're not talking about it, then it is siloed. People, I think, sometimes feel ashamed or feel like they're doing something wrong. They're using AI tools, and maybe they are. But if there isn't space to have conversation, then you can't surface that. So I feel like that's such a good piece of advice for starting conversations with
mhm,
students because if you ignore it, that doesn't make it go away. Vera Kubero has done a lot of work in
mhm,
North Carolina with AI. I had a
mhm,
conversation with her a few months ago, and she compared the way schools responded to social media to some of the ways we respond to AI, and that we're just like, oh, if we ignore it, it'll be fine. But the reality is, ignoring social media didn't benefit students and it didn't benefit educators, and
mhm,
students need some explicit guidance and they need places to talk and think about this life-changing technology that's in their hands. And so I'm
mhm,
really appreciative of creating that space because I think that's such a great starting place and also
mhm.
important for students and for teachers too.
Yeah. And I think that it is like a how do we address the elephant in the room? The analogy to social media is I think there's some strong similarities there that we have an opportunity now to maybe talk about a technology and have some conversations with students before it may continue to kind of take off and develop and proliferate into many aspects of our digital lives. And um, one thing I would add there as well is that a lot of teachers are not sure that they can have a conversation about AI because they don't know a lot about AI themselves. And for me, like I don't, there's so many things I've spent a lot of time learning about AI as much as I can, and there's still so many unanswered questions. I don't know that there's ever a spot where you're like, oh, I have enough knowledge now to lead some conversations. I think we can all open up the conversation to students and facilitate an informal dialogue about what the use of these tools may look like in their school lives, or maybe it's not in their school lives, or maybe in just in education in general. Even asking kids, hey, what do you know about AI? And do you think we should teach students how to use AI in school? Like those are good conversation starters and really in my experience can get the ball rolling. And I have to say, all right, we're going to pause here and we're going to jump to next
Oh,
to what
I'm
we're
sure
working
they're
on today.
very excited to talk
Hmm.
about it. I mean, students are aware AI exists, so having space. I've always found as a teacher, you don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to
Hmm.
be honest and willing to listen. And
Hmm.
students are often desperate to talk about things that maybe as adults we're not quite sure how to talk about. And I feels like one of those things that I imagine a lot of students are really eager to conversations about, but they don't necessarily have adults to lead them through how to intentionally approach usage.
Hmm. And there, a lot of them are really curious too, like why I think many students think that I'm just as a teacher, I'm anti-AI, or maybe because they know me in the classroom or in my CS class, know that I like learning about AI. Like I guess two different sides there. But a lot of students will be like, well, why do you not like AI? Or why do you like AI? Depending on which bucket they put me in. And so there's a lot of curiosity there that can lead to why do we think that like a lot of teachers are against AI. At least students in my classroom have felt. Why are a lot of teachers against AI? And then it's like, well, I don't know that that's quite the case. Like, I think that a lot of teachers are just concerned about AI's use in the classroom because it could be impacting a lot of the instructional exercises and activities that we've spent a lot of time putting together. And so I think there's a lot of different layers there that those informal conversations can start to scratch away at.
Oh, I love that. It's like when you're able to have those conversations, then they're able to kind of ask their questions about how teachers are
Exactly.
responding. Do you have some like particularly interesting questions or comments that you've received from students? I don't know, they could be funny or just like thought provoking.
I think one for me that has really stood out is I was using one of the AI EDU snapshots. The news item it was talking about is new AI models to do college level calculus. If those get developed, what are the risks, benefits of that technology? Should those be used? Students talk a lot about, or they will have a dialogue a lot about. That snapshot resulted in a lot of conversations about, well, then people wouldn't have to do their math homework because AI can do all the math homework, or maybe it could discover new things, which would be really fascinating. And then one student who was fairly vocal, it's like, how is this new? ChatGPT does already does this. And I'm like, huh, interesting. Let's lean into that a little bit more. And students like, yeah, ChatGPT is great. It does all my math homework. If I want it to, it does all my math homework. And I'm like, okay. But we're talking in this news item about calculus. And are you in calculus? And the student wasn't in calculus. So I pulled up on the board in front of the room a calculus problem. And the student then went and asked AI to solve the calculus problem and goes, look, it got the answer. And I was like, oh, cool. How do you know the answer's right? And he's like, well, because it shows me the step by step. And I'm like, okay, cool. You are following some instructions of like, here's how we might prove something. We're looking at the step by step, but the step by step is pointless. If someone gives me the blueprints, the step by step to build a house, that doesn't mean I can build a house. There's a lot of skills I need to in order to follow those. And so then I was like, this is does the step by step even help us out if we can't understand it? What can we do? And then we go full circle to, well, maybe we could ask the calculus teacher to come into class and verify. And I'm like, great. So we have these tools, like people around us who have a lot of skills in this educational institution, in this building, and we can really leverage those tools rather than the ones that might be in our pockets to solve challenging problems like calculus problems, right? And so that one really stands out to me because I think that there is a lot of great thinking. There's a lot of great thinking going on for that student wanting to make sure that the step by step is there and the getting an answer, but it still misses the point that like my AI usage, like I could take a look at it in a coding setting. My AI usage in coding extends just as far as my coding knowledge. If it's writing code that I don't know how it works, then once there's an error in that code, I can't fix it. And so the same thing can go for other concepts, such as math, where it gave me an answer, but I can't verify whether or not that answer is correct.
Right. And you have to switch from thinking about the process, like from thinking about the output to the process. In the past, maybe you're
Hmm.
like, oh, I have this answer. But now it's really important to understand, like, how do we come to that? You might be able to
Hmm.
vibe code something and have this
Exactly.
cool app that you made, and then you write one prompt and the whole thing breaks and you can't fix it because
Yeah.
you don't understand the process. And so
Mm.
I think it's really cool to hear an example of you having that kind of revelatory moment with your student where they're like, oh, I can use this, it's fine. But I think that you were really able to kind of help them understand, like, where does this lead, what are we moving toward. It's very, I think it's a really cool example.
Yeah, and those the vibe coding example that you talk about is totally like there's a lot of comparisons that can go there. And maybe there are times that I do want to just experiment and vibe code and see what this looks like. And maybe that helps spark my curiosity to learning a new coding language or something along those lines. But in my upper level computer science class last year, I made the clear distinction between whether we're are we doing something for learning or are we doing something for exploring? And there would be times where we would have maybe I would build a custom chatbot for the students, or maybe I'd let them go to a chatbot and write some code. And I would say, hey, we're in exploration mode. You can go wherever you want. We're going to have some structured reflection about our AI usage afterwards. Call it learning mode, where, hey, if I have AI write dictionaries for me. I'm never going to learn how to write dictionaries in Python. So why would I have AI do that? Maybe AI could support in helping me understand that code, but I should do the practice rather than having AI do that practice for me.
I think this is something I've been thinking about a lot is how teacher like being a teacher is more than just about teaching content. It's about helping students understand approaches that are going to serve them in the long run. It's about helping people to see, okay, this is who you are today, but you're building towards someone in the future.
Mhm.
Both of your examples, you're helping students to understand, like, yes, you have this technology, but you have to think about how you approach it because of the goals that you have
Mhm.
or whatever you're working
Mhm.
toward or learning toward. And I think, we can design great new assignments with AI. There's ways that it can save
Mhm.
teachers time, but what you're talking about, that sort of navigating the technology to support students and shifting their mindset, I think is incredibly important and is what is, in a way, what good teaching has always been. It's just how do we get teachers to a point where they feel confident enough to have those
Mhm.
conversations so that students can make choices that align with what they actually want.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's really, really powerful. You've talked a little bit about AI ethics at the very beginning. So I know that's
Mhm.
something that you're interested in and that you care about. And some of your examples, like a synthetic voice, feels
Mhm.
like you're touching on this ethical piece. But what are you doing right now to help students understand AI ethics or to help teachers understand the ethical components of AI or ethical concerns?
Yeah, I think that the term AI literacy has really popped up in the AI education community in the past couple of years. A component of AI literacy is kind of understanding the risks, benefits, or ethical impacts of using different AI tools. And so I guess I would highlight again any of the AI literacy curriculum that AIEDU has put out as ways to have some of those conversations about tricky topics like synthetic voice. Another one that comes to mind is AI for Education has a great lesson about understanding deepfakes. So when someone creates a fake image of someone else doing something or looking a certain way that doesn't actually exist. And kind of on that note, for myself, I really like fly fishing. It's great as much as I can when I get out and go spend some time on the river. But what I started to like to do the past 2 school years was generate fake pictures of me catching fish. And so they were not real fish, they were larger fish than I would ever catch. And so it was a lot of fun to kind of start to hide those maybe within my slides and have the students start to determine whether or not they thought that there was a real picture. But what I also have noticed on that is that that activity is a little bit kind of pointless now because like no one can detect whether or not an image is AI generated. I mean, there used to be the whole, oh, it has 6 fingers, but that's pretty much gone.
Yeah,
There's
those
no
hands
six
used
finger
to look really
images. Yeah.
bad.
If you're getting 6 finger images generated, then you're using the wrong image generator. It's been interesting to see how quickly some of those image or video generation tools have advanced in the last couple years and even just the last 12 months. But on that side, I'd say like some AI generated images, it could be of me or of just something else, are kind of a way to, again, open that door for conversation where students say, you can generate images of anybody. And I'm like, yeah, so if I took an image of the principal going fishing with me, how would that how would that be? And then the principal would probably be really confused as to why there's this fake picture of them going fishing. But that can open the door as well to like talk more at length about what would be appropriate or inappropriate uses of these tools and the idea of like, oh, if I do want to create a fake image of my principal fishing, then I should probably go ask for his consent. Like those types of steps to take when using these new tools. And so, yeah, I think that those are kind of some of the ethics piece and the appropriate use piece, I feel like come up all just naturally throughout conversations where students will start to make connections of like, oh, I could make this LLM do this or that. And it's like, yeah, should we do that? Should we have it do? I mean, the homework aspect is there, but there's also like, oh, we could create all sorts of different things. What is appropriate and what's not appropriate.
I love so many things about your example. One, you were able to incorporate this sort of like person, like who you are as a person, what very human, and also be
Mhm.
kind of funny. Like you're using people that
Mhm.
they know to talk about a topic that's actually really heavy. The fact
Mhm.
that, somebody could
Yeah.
make an image of you doing anything is really scary if you take time to think about it, with social media and some of the other tools that
Mhm.
students have access to. So your ability to kind of approach that lightheartedly, but also inspire some really serious conversations about what this means. I think is it's a really fun example, but also has it illustrates the seriousness so well.
Yeah, I think it is really serious, and having some way to at least start those conversations and have students think about them is, and or provide opportunities for educators to start thinking about them as well.
The other thing, and this is not on an ethics case, but something that I have been, a lot of teachers I talk to are like, how do we detect AI usage?
Mhm.
Like everybody's like, how do we catch students when they're doing this so that they won't do it? And I think the image example is a good proof point on how difficult it really is to
Mhm.
detect usage because, now used to with images there
Mhm.
were six fingers and now there's
Mhm.
just hands. And I think in text too, it is it's just the technology is getting better, and because it's getting better it's harder to identify whether that's in the outputs that you assign for
Mhm.
students or the way that we set things up. So I feel like it's a hard pill to swallow, whether it's a deep fake or an essay that you've assigned or your math homework answers that AI might create. The output may not be real and you may not know. And that's really uncomfortable.
I think you talked previously about thinking more about systems and how the impact that AI might have on education as a whole. That is a huge pill for teachers to swallow to say, now there's no way that I can detect or authenticate whether or not this is student work or AI work. For most teachers in most classes, that means reinventing their entire curriculum. And we already know that teachers don't have time to even reinvent some of their curriculum during the day. And so it's a huge lift, I think, for teachers to shift and pivot into assignments that are like we maybe AI proof, right? And I know there's a lot of great teachers out there who are talking about ways that you can kind of re-envision assignments or transition maybe more towards projects or presentations rather than something like an essay. And I think that there are really great teachers doing great work out there, and it's a big lift for a lot of the teachers across the board. There's some really great innovators, and if we think about how to support all teachers in doing that, I think teachers need time to experiment with tools, to think about modifications to assessment where necessary, and to just spend some time. And I know many districts have maybe an AI PD or something along those lines. I think teachers need a lot of support.
Absolutely. I think support and time and grace because this is
Mhm.
it's a hard
Yeah.
shift. Do you have an example of how you've changed an assessment or how you recommend changing an assessment that to make it, I don't know, like generative AI proof or like just to be able to change what you're asking in this new age of technology?
In the coding world, teaching computer science, if a student can explain the code that was written there, they have a strong understanding of the code. And that's a little bit different than in a writing or a humanities
Mm-hmm.
class because there is so much more voice in writing. I would have a discussion with students, or I would predetermine what was appropriate AI use in the classroom. And so a lot of people have referred to that kind of as a stoplight of like, hey, a red light means you can't use AI at all. Yellow light is a little bit, and green light is, yes, you can use AI. And I know there's a lot of great assessment steps like that broken out that people have started to build. In my upper level computer science class, I think that having a candid conversation with students about, hey, what do we think is appropriate if we're learning this new skill? We can't use AI to do that, but maybe we have a previously learned skill that we can have AI help us set up to get ready to kind of demonstrate that learning within the coding program that we're building. And so I do think kind of putting here's the boundaries that we're going to work within. And I think those types of restrictions or limitations were effective in my class because at the beginning of that school year, I started out with a, hey, you can go build whatever you want with, here's a chatbot that I set up for that. I used a platform called PlayLab. I don't know if you're familiar with PlayLab, but I think they're doing really amazing education work. And I went through a professional learning community with them and then learned how to build chatbots on their platform and then built a chatbot for my classroom for students to use in coding. And that at the beginning of this last school year, that class kind of just went and explored and built whatever they wanted and saw for themselves that AI can't really build everything that you want all the time, or you run into errors and you can't fix them because you don't understand the code that it just wrote. And so, starting out the year with a big, ambitious project that was accompanied by a lot of reflection and a big presentation to the class about how students use AI tools, because students got to explore at the beginning, then later in the year, when we started to have those restrictions, I think students understood why maybe it was a good idea to, all right, I'm going to self-police myself and not let AI do these things that I'm trying to learn right now. I think a word I hear thrown around a lot is productive struggle. And I think that's hard to self-police, right? It's challenging for students to always put themselves in that zone, but having a little bit of a dialogue about why we might have these limitations for a given assignment. And what I found is at the end, students start to say, like, oh, I think we should use AI for this, but not for that, and start to create their own rules.
I love that. There's two things that, just good education practice. One, you have a big project that people know they have to work toward, and helping students understand the where they're going, I think is such good education practice. And then
Mhm.
also co-creating norms together. You're just like you're building your classroom culture around what AI looks like. And I think these are skills that teachers have and know how to do. It's a big context shift, but I think there's so much that teachers already do that can be applied to this generative AI world that we're in now. It just is in a different context. And so experienced teachers in particular are not starting from scratch. They can
Mhm.
build on. It's a different context.
And in that note of co-creating, I think that co-creating and exploring together, like I found myself being like, oh wow, that is interesting. I didn't think about using AI in that way. I highlight that just because I think that as a teacher, I also had to go in with a little bit more of an exploratory mindset as well with the students, because at the end of the day, I'm exploring with these students together about how maybe giving them some freedom to explore or maybe putting in some restrictions, seeing how those different instructional methods work in this new age of AI.
You're learning side by side. So I feel
Yeah,
like you always learn a lot from your students. And this is just
exactly.
another way that's happening. In the spirit of learning, I want to ask kind of a couple of quick questions about ways that you are learning. So, any things
Mhm.
that you're reading, you're listening to that help you learn?
I'd say my first place to start, I really like the book Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick. And I did a book club with teachers at my school last year where we focused on that book. And I think that for any district leaders out there, that was probably one of the best things, kind of best first steps to start thinking about AI across the board and with a lot of different teachers in the room. So I really like that book. And Ethan Mollett continues to post on his Substack, which I found is a kind of continuation of that book because it's a year and a half old, and so he's got a lot of great Substack posts that continue some of his kind of flavor of writing. I also like podcasts, and so I listen to AI for Humans, which is kind of like a weekly update on some of the different things that AI can do, and the Hard Fork podcast as well, kind of similar vein about learning, seeing what happened in AI recently. And then AI EDU has recently put out AI EDU Studios, kind of some long form interviews with education leaders about AI's impact, especially K-12.
Cool. Thanks so much
Mhm.
for sharing those. And then I have a couple of quick questions. So rapid fire questions. So what's a favorite AI habit that grounds your practice?
I think writing's really great. Yes, AI is good at writing, but I think people write for a lot of different reasons. And if I need to think about something or reflect about something, writing is really great. And there's no replacement for talking to students. And so we can think as much about or have as many conversations with AI about the right way to approach a topic. But ultimately, having those conversations with students is always enlightening and surprising.
Okay, next question. AI capability that you're still skeptical about.
I think I'm a little bit skeptical about AI being used as a tutor in a K-12 setting. I think that there are some examples of AI tutors where you can really have some chatbots that help support in certain areas. I think a lot about maybe differentiating some content, or maybe for certain accommodations, there can be really excellent use cases. But I don't think that implementing AI tutors in most classrooms for most students is going to be really that helpful. I think it's kind of just a computer program for kids to start using and playing around with and seeing how they can break it.
Okay, what's a student quote that sums up the AI era?
I would go back to kind of the math example that I said earlier, which like saying a student saying the math is right because it shows me the step by step. And it's like, yes, we do have some previous methods for assessing whether or not a math problem is right, which is like looking through the step by step. But we have to take another step further back and say, well, can we actually read the step by step? And could that step by step possibly be wrong? Because if I'm looking at a calculator, watching a math teacher do it on the board, I'm seeing that verified. Whereas an LLM is just predicting all of the numbers that should be in that step by step. And so I think that really highlights for me like AI is a tool. When should we use that tool? What is the appropriate usage of that tool look like? And how is that maybe shifting or impacting some of our current educational practices?
That's a great example. We're coming up on the end of our conversation. I
Mhm.
want to ask you for a call to action for
Mhm.
educators. If educators who aren't using AI yet were to take one first step the first week of school, because it's still summer, what would that step be?
I would say to like put on a hat of curiosity and write down 10 questions that you might want to ask students about AI. And I put these in the informal discussion questions with students. And so some of my favorites are, what is AI good at? What is AI not good at? And what is one thing you want to learn about AI? We could also say, what do you know about AI? You can have some more maybe like opinion questions of like, do you think students should use AI in school? Yes, no, maybe. Those types of like put a curiosity hat on and really, really think about what you might want to know from your students. And I say write those down now because I know during the year it's hard to dedicate that time to putting those things together. And so maybe once a month, twice a month, ask one of those questions to start the day and see what you learn because that's a great way to break the ice. And what I've found is that kind of keeps that snowball rolling even more because then kids are like, oh, you're curious about this too. Let's chat.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for
Mhm.
sharing about ways that teachers can get started. And as it's the summer for not all, but some teachers, it'll be
Mhm.
a good opportunity to reflect and think about where these questions can show up during the year. My
Mhm.
last question that I always like to ask people is the question or idea or thought about AI that kind of keeps you up at night that you can't stop thinking about.
I think that AI chatbot companions are something that keep me up at night. I think we talked about the social media analogy, and I think that there's some really concerning uses of AI chatbot companions with like replica or character AI. And I think we've already seen some concerning reporting about some of those websites. I know that a lot of high school students and middle school students are exploring and downloading apps and playing around with them. Some students are spending a significant amount of time chatting with a AI companion. And I think that when I think about really great benefit of a high school setting and why I really enjoyed high schools. You get to be around all these different people and get to know them and have fun and have those face-to-face interactions. And I think it's concerning to me that there definitely are a percentage of students that are spending a lot of time chatting with an AI chatbot.
Yeah, it's a good thing to be aware of and to think about. And with, as a lot of things in my conversation, I think being aware of what's concerning allows us to enter into conversations with students and each other. And those conversations, hopefully, are one way to kind of
Mm.
curve some of the,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, thanks so much, Connor. That is my last question. But if there's anything on your mind that you want to
Mhm.
share right now, I want to hold space for you to, I don't know, last thoughts.
Yeah, I will make a little comment about. So I'm putting together some AI Trailblazer fellowship cohorts for rural teachers. And so these are through AI EDU. I've been part of these cohorts for the past 2 years. And so now this fall, I'll be organizing and facilitating some of those cohorts. So if you're listening to this when it comes out or close to when it comes out, you should be able to apply to join my cohort. It is a 10-week long cohort, meets every other week. And kind of the big component of that cohort is helping teachers build their understanding of AI and then equipping them with some tools to talk to their students about AI. Teachers who complete this cohort get a $875 stipend and also get connected with a community of ADU AI trailblazers across the US. I'm excited to dive into that and work with a lot of teachers across the country and facilitate those cohorts. If you're interested, go ahead and apply or shoot me an email.
That's a wrap on our conversation with Connor Mulvaney, teacher, AI coach, and trailblazer in chief. 3 quick takeaways. First, start with questions, not answers. Ask students what AI is good at and what it's not, and what they want to learn. Second, co create classroom guardrails, a shared AI traffic light rubric, red, yellow, green, builds trust faster than a detector ever could. Finally, community beats solo tinkering. Connor's Trailblazer Fellowship pairs every lesson with a national peer network and expert coaching. Applications close Friday, August 15th. Hit the links in today's show notes to apply for a Trailblazer cohort, rural or national tracks. Connect with Connor on LinkedIn for PD workshops or download free AI literacy snapshots from AI EDU. And if your organization is ready for a roadmap beyond the classroom, Kinwise runs everything from a 30-day teacher AI pilot to a 1-day AI leadership lab that helps district teams draft board-ready guidelines. Details and bookings at kinwise.org. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and stay Kinwise.